Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're decoding something that affects literally every family, student, teacher, and administrator every single year, yet it's often completely misunderstood. We're talking about the New Mexico Public Education Department's framework for school calendars. We're going to break down the exact state rules that dictate local school schedules across New Mexico, specifically looking at the guidelines as we move into the 2025-2026 school year and beyond. Let's get into it. So, I want to start by challenging a basic assumption. If I were to ask you right now, hey, how long is a school year? Your first instinct is probably to grab a calendar, find that exciting first day in August, find the last day in May, and then just count the days in between, right? We are so conditioned to think about the school year strictly as a list of dates. But to truly understand how New Mexico structures its education system from the ground up, we have to take that mindset and completely throw it out the window. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Beyond just the dates. 2. The 1140-hour rule. 3. What counts as learning. 4. Weather, remote, and holidays. 5. The funding connection. And finally, number 6, what parents should know. Kicking things off with Section 1, Beyond just the dates. This is a real paradigm shift. A New Mexico school calendar is definitely not just a daybook. It is essentially a state-regulated framework based strictly on a budget of instructional hours. I really want you to think of this like a giant bank account. Every single event on the school schedule, every class, every assembly, every 2-hour snow delay, is a transaction against a very strict time budget mandated by the state. You aren't just crossing off days on a kitchen calendar. Administrators are meticulously spending and managing precious instructional hours to make sure they don't run out before the year is actually over. Moving on to Section 2, the 1140-hour rule. This is the core state mandate. 1,140, that is the magic number. New Mexico requires students to be in school programs for a minimum of 1,140 instructional hours per year. Notice we're not talking about a certain number of days here, but 1,140 total hours. This is absolutely the single most important metric governing every public school in the state as of June 2026. Every local calendar, no matter how it looks to you on paper, has to successfully budget this exact amount of time over the course of the academic year. Now, what's really interesting about this is that because the mandate is based on hours and not days, districts have incredible flexibility in how they actually choose to spend their budget. You might see one district running a traditional 5-day week, while the neighboring district chooses a 4-day week. And the state strictly defines a 4-day week as a calendar where all weeks have at most 4 instructional days. So the daily routines look completely different for families living in these respective districts, but in the eyes of the state, they're identical. Why? Because they're both hitting that exact same 1,140-hour minimum budget. All right, Section 3, what counts as learning? Let's look at how they actually manage that time budget. Well, the state doesn't just hand over a massive lump sum of hours and say, good luck. They set very strict daily boundaries on how those hours are accumulated. A full school day has to have at least 5.5 instructional hours, but it absolutely cannot exceed 7.5 hours. A half day? That has to hit at least 3.5 hours. These rigid parameters are super important. They guarantee that the schedule actually supports real, focused learning time. It essentially protects students by preventing districts from cramming way too many hours into, say, a massive 10-hour day just to check a compliance box. So what actually counts as a transaction against that 1,140-hour budget? This brilliantly illustrates the divide. On the instructional time side, you have time spent learning academic standards, enrichment programs, and actually even breakfast after the bell counts as real instruction. But contrast that with the non-instructional side. Your standard lunch period doesn't count toward the hours. Meet the teacher events, orientation, device pickup days, also non-instructional. So, while parents might feel like the school year has officially started because they just picked up a school-issued tablet, the state's official clock hasn't actually started ticking yet. But hey, what about the teachers, right? Professional development is absolutely vital to a healthy school ecosystem, but the state places some pretty strict caps on how much of that work can be billed to the student instruction budget. For grades K through 6, up to 60 hours of professional work can count toward the 1,140 minimum. For grades 7 through 12, it's just up to 30 hours. Now, schools are totally free to schedule more training than that, but any extra hours will simply not count towards satisfying that required state minimum. It's a real balancing act between training educators and keeping kids in seats, which is exactly why it pays for parents to keep an eye on how these specific days are scheduled. Which brings us to Section 4, weather, remote, and holidays. It's all about flexibility versus compliance.
Look, we all know remote learning became a heavily utilized tool recently, but New Mexico has set firm limits to make sure it stays a safety net for unexpected disruptions rather than a permanent loophole. Schools can schedule a maximum of 4 remote learning days per year, and that is capped at a hard 32 total hours. Furthermore, unless it's a dedicated virtual school, at least 50% of that remote day must be live, synchronous instruction with a teacher. It's really meant to provide continuity when things go wrong, not to act as a shortcut around the calendar rules.
Now, here's a pretty unique quirk of the New Mexico calendar: mandatory election holidays. According to state guidance, every single general election and regular local election must be a school holiday for both students and staff at every public school in the state. This means civic events directly alter the rhythm of the academic year. Honestly, if you're a family moving here from another state, this might actually catch you completely off guard when you first look at the district schedule. And then, of course, we have New Mexico's crazy, unpredictable geography and climate. We're talking snow in the mountains, high winds, unexpected flooding. The crucial point here is this: Mother Nature doesn't get a free pass. If unexpected weather closures cause a school's actual instructional time to drop below that magical 1,140 hours, the district's calendar must be revised. That lost time absolutely has to be made up later in the year, which is exactly why families so often see those sudden makeup days tacked onto the spring schedule. They have to remain in compliance. All right, Section 5, the funding connection. Time to follow the money. So you might be wondering, why is the state so incredibly strict about auditing these exact hours and limits? Well, because these calendars aren't just, nice academic planners posted on a school's website for parents to print out. They are essentially highly scrutinized financial documents. Districts and charter schools are strictly required to submit their calendars to the Public Education Department's School Budget Bureau. The Bureau uses these exact schedules to verify compliance and, crucially, to calculate the school's actual funding. This directly ties into the K-12 Plus program funding, which is provided through the State Equalization Guarantee. To trigger this specific funding, a 5-day week calendar must have more than 180 school days, and a 4-day week must have more than 155 school days. Remember those snow days we just talked about? If those days are canceled, dropping the school below the legal minimums, and the district chooses not to make them up, their K-12 Plus program funding may actually be reduced. Let that sink in for a second. Calendar design in New Mexico is literally a high-stakes financial issue. Let's move to our final section, Section 6, What Parents Should Know. Let's see how you can navigate your district. Okay, so knowing all this high-level policy is great, but what does it mean for you? Here is your actionable checklist as a parent. Because local boards have flexibility, the schedule in Albuquerque might look vastly different from Santa Fe, Las Cruces, or Farmington. First, step 1, identify if your district runs a 4-day or 5-day week, because that sets your family's whole weekly rhythm. Second, scan that calendar for those scheduled remote learning and staff development days, keeping in mind that they are pulling from a very limited state pool. Third, look for the fine print. Review the specific language around weather makeup days right now so you aren't shocked when spring break gets unexpectedly adjusted. And fourth, always check for district updates throughout the year. Because as we've learned today, if hours unexpectedly drop, that calendar is going to change for sure. There's a quote right from the official guidelines that I think just perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding this entire paradigm shift we've explored today. In New Mexico, the calendar is not just a schedule. It is part of how the state defines a complete school year. It's not a list of dates. It's a complex, dynamic, and closely monitored budget of time, meticulously designed to ensure every single student receives their 1,140 hours of mandated learning, no matter what part of the state they happen to live in. So, armed with this whole new understanding, I highly encourage you to go take a look at your own district's schedule through this brand new lens. Don't just look for those exciting start and end dates. Look at the balance. Ask yourself, is your local school calendar budgeting its hours to truly maximize your child's learning this year? Thanks so much for tuning into this explainer, and happy learning.